Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Today, we are doing an absolutely emergency broadcast. I was going to take the day off. We had to talk about this. Folks, President Trump, I kid you not, has just made one of the most consequential, decisive decisions that he has ever made. He was president for 4 years the first time. He's back in the White House now. He's been in the White House for 8 months again. It's the second term. Folks, out of all that time, he has just made one of the single biggest decisions we have ever seen our president make. What is that decision? Trump has just decided to designate Antifa, however you pronounce it. They call themselves the anti-fascists. He has decided to designate them as a major terrorist organization. They will be henceforth going forward. Of course, he has to sign an executive order. Probably he actually signs that tomorrow, but he has given the notice. He's given the heads up here. He is going to do it. He's going to designate them as a major terrorist organization. So, folks, we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about the implications, what this looks like, why he's doing this, what this means. This broadcast today, like I said, emergency broadcast out of nowhere. This was not part of the schedule. This one's going to be real punchy and to the point, and I want to keep this on track here. So, folks, first off, this is what President Trump had to say about this 2 days ago when he was asked whether or not he would consider designating Antifa or other similar groups as a terrorist organization. This is 2 days ago. As a little bit of a recap, take a look at this.
Given with all the that's going on with Charlie Kirk's assassination and the left-wing violence going on, do you have plans, and actually this is a great opportunity with all these people, do you plan on designating Antifa finally a domestic terror organization?
Well, it's something I would do, yeah. If I have support from the people back here, I think we'd start with Pam, I think. But I would, if you give me, I would do that 100%. And others also, by the way. But Antifa is terrible.
Are there other groups that you can think of?
There are other groups, yeah. There are other groups. We have some pretty radical groups, and they got away with murder. And also, I've been speaking to the Attorney General about bringing RICO against some of the people that you've been reading about that have been putting up millions and millions of dollars for agitation.
And potentially RICO charges for the people that have been funding these groups like Antifa. There are other domestic far-left, radically progressive terror groups in the country as well. And now he said, so what did he say 2 days ago? He said that, listen, yeah, I would love to do it if I have the support of my Attorney General, of the Department of Justice. That's Pam Bondi standing behind him. Presumably over the last 2 days, he was able to get that support, and he wants to push RICO charges here to hold the entire network accountable. Okay, so let's talk about what Trump had to say today. Literally just, guys, he said this 45 minutes ago. This is breaking news. You guys are dialed in the news right now. He said, this is President Trump. He said on Truth Social, I am pleased to inform our many USA patriots that I am designating Antifa a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, a major terrorist organization. I will also be strongly recommending that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest legal standards and practices. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So all of this shadowy far left NGO, a lot of the money is foreign that's pouring into the country to agitate these groups, to cause, sort of foment domestic chaos. People like George Soros, multiple others as well, have been pumping money into these far left radical terror cells. In fact, as it would seem, the investigation is still ongoing. Even Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, may have been a part of one of these far left radical terror groups. Who knows who in the hell he was working with? The FBI is peeling back the layers here. And as it would seem, there are a lot of layers to peel back. All of these far left radical terror networks are just incredibly shadowy. Who knows what's going on? And so designating these guys Antifa as a terrorist organization is the first of many steps to finally start ripping the far left terror apparatus apart. I know guys like me, people like you, have been calling for Trump to do this since 2017. Listen, we've had this Antifa problem for a long time. You guys know I grew up in the Portland, Oregon area. Portland, Oregon is the #1 Antifa stronghold in the nation. You all know that. I went to university in Portland, Oregon. In my college classes, I had students, my fellow students in university, that were members of Antifa. I was going to school with Antifa people back in like 2013, 2014. This has been a big problem. Finally, we're going to take these freaks to bat. We're going to hold these people accountable. Let's keep on reading here. Steve Bannon chimed in on this the other day. This is actually before we just got today's news that he's finally doing it. Trump is finally doing it. This is what Steve Bannon had to say about this and why it is so important. Take a look at this.
You designate them a terrorist organization, then all kind of good things happen.
Yeah.
You start subpoenaing telephone records, text messages. You go to the telephone companies like they went on us and took all our stuff. Fine, do it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. See the interconnection. See who's financing them. See who's contacting them. See what politicians are working with them. See what media types are working with them. And then we ought to round up the media types that are working with them as accessories. This is doable. And if you want to avoid a civil war, it needs to be done today. Use the powers of the state. We happen to be in charge.
And so that, as of 45 minutes ago, is exactly what President Trump has done. Steve Bannon is totally on point. Listen, every single person that over the last 10 or 15 years has been affiliated or associated with Antifa, now, guess what? They have been a member, a part of a domestic terror, a major terrorist organization. The second Trump actually signs this executive order, we know he's going to do it. He just said he was going to do it. What does that mean? Listen, if you've been a part of Antifa, if you've been out there marching around the streets of Portland or Seattle or Atlanta or Sacramento, all of these cities, if you have ever been a part of this, your bank history, your credit statements, your transactions, your cell phone logs, every single thing, your text messages, your internet history. If you've been, we're going to start pulling the internet service provider data history of all of these people. If you have ever been a part of Antifa, you are screwed. That is what this means. These people, where's the money coming from? Who are they talking to? The internet history, all of it is what this means. Now, something that pops in my head. Who here has heard of a streamer, a live broadcaster over on Twitch? His name is Hassan Piker. I think a lot of you guys know who that is. It occurs to me that a couple years ago, Hassan, this is more like 2018, 2019, maybe 2020, Hassan Piker, I remember very clearly, he was talking about how he was a member of Antifa. I think in the last couple years, he's kind of backed away from that. He has shied away from that. But a couple years ago, 5-6 years ago, I remember he was talking about how he was a member of Antifa, at a minimum, how he supported Antifa. He had an Antifa poster behind him every day on his live broadcast. What's going to happen with him? People like him, all these far left streamers, these broadcasters, these podcasters. I'm not even talking about the people marching around the streets. Of course we are. But you've got famous people. Steve Bannon says people in the media. Who knows? Listen, if you've been on CNN or MSNBC supporting these Antifa guys, carrying water for them, you know what? Hey, maybe it's, how can I put this? Maybe the roosters have come back to the roost. It's time to dish out some comeuppances here. The day of comeuppance has arrived, is what I'm trying to say. Now, Jesse Waters on Fox News was talking to Vice President J.D. Vance earlier today about this very idea. Vice President J.D. Vance calls Trantifa a terrorist movement. And now, I mean, this morning it was his opinion. We all shared that opinion, but now it's going to be the law of the land. As soon as President Trump signs this executive order, and we know he is, it's going to be the law of the land. Let's take a look at this.
The militant transgender movement, is that a domestic terrorist threat?
If you are encouraging people to commit acts of violence against the United States government or against your fellow Americans, absolutely, you're involved in a terrorist movement. I don't know enough about that particular organization, but what you increasingly see, Jesse, is you see people in the trans community and other members of the far left who are saying They are so threatened by negative rhetoric that they must take arms and attack people. If your movement is telling you to commit acts of violence against people for speaking words that you don't like,
and that is exactly what their movement is doing.
number one, you're evil. And number two, you are engaged in a terrorist movement. And that's part of what we have to root out in the White House. And this is very important, Jesse. I've talked to a lot of people about this. I've talked to, Stephen Miller probably 7 times in the past 2 days. We are working very hard to ensure that the funding networks for left-wing violence, that the radicalization networks for left-wing violence, that if you encourage or fund your fellow Americans or anybody else to commit acts of violence because you disagree with political speech, you are going to be treated like a terrorist organization, and we're going to go after you.
Folks, real quick, I have to say, interjection real quick. Stephen Miller, out of everybody in the Trump administration, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen Miller was personally probably the closest with Charlie Kirk, rest in peace. Stephen Miller and Kirk, they were good friends. They had known each other for 10 years. They've been talking. They were compatriots. And so, we've seen a couple of these Stephen Miller monologues over the last couple days. Stephen Miller is pissed. Stephen Miller is ready to go scorched earth. Stephen Miller, to me, he is sounding like a rabid dog, but not because his anger, his ire is focused. He's not just flailing, he is dialed in. He wants, I was going to say vengeance, maybe that sounds a little bit negative. He wants righteous, warranted vengeance. He wants, a better word for this is justice. Stephen Miller is done playing games. And so I would imagine that behind the scenes over the last couple days since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, that Stephen Miller has been behind the scenes here, one of the biggest proponents and advocates. Hey, Trump, listen, these Antifa guys, you need to sign this executive order. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Miller personally drafted up this executive order that Trump is going to sign in the next couple days that officially designates Antifa as a major terrorist organization. I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Miller personally drafted it up for President Trump. This guy wants justice, and thank God for that. This is something that should have happened, in my opinion, back in 2017. This whole Antifa violence thing that's been plaguing our country should have been shut down a decade ago. Finally, we're doing it. Let's go.
Because Joe Biden said white supremacy was the biggest domestic terror threat.
Which, of course, is absurd. The statistics don't bear that out. But if you look at what the Biden administration did against the phantom threat of white supremacy, we actually need to take some of the lessons and say, if there is funding sources that is going for this stuff, if you're an NGO and you're actually funding riots and other kinds of political violence, why wouldn't we go after that? Why wouldn't we cut off those funding sources? And why wouldn't we prosecute people who engage in violence? It's interesting, Jesse. The people who are saying this is Gestapo stuff, they're calling us Nazis for saying that if you're funding or supporting left-wing violence, you ought to pay consequences for it. It really makes you think that the left has not done any of the soul searching it has to do to actually deal with political violence in this.
They have no plan to shut this down. In fact, not only do they not want to or have a plan to shut this type of violence down, they are hand-waving it. If they are not hand-waving it, saying, whatever, it's not a big deal. If not that, they are just outspokenly and explicitly supporting it. They have been in support of it. We have seen hundreds of thousands of Americans across the last 7 days following the Charlie Kirk assassination that are celebrating the violence. They are promoting more violence. We need to shut this down. We need to rip this problem out at the roots, and that means going after the NGOs funding this, all these grunts, these far left Antifa grunts on the streets that are actually carrying out the violence and destroying the country. These people need to be held accountable, thrown into a prison cell. And folks, we have some massive implications here that I want to start talking about right now. Bear with me here, folks. Okay, because I've got some notes I want to go through. What is this going to look like? What is it going to mean? Bear with me. Check this out. Designating Antifa as a, quote, major terrorist organization, as President Trump put it in his Truth Social post 45 minutes ago, would be the pretense for President Trump to then invoke officially, now he would have the pretense to invoke the 1807 Insurrection Act, which would allow him to then use the U.S. military, namely the National Guard, to quell Antifa's insurrection. They are a domestic terrorist organization. Now, keep that in mind. They are quite literally terminologically engaging in a terrorist occupation and insurrection, domestic violence. These are terms used in the 1807 Insurrection Act. So now that they are a terrorist organization they are embedded in almost every major city across the country, now Insurrection Act, now National Guard, as President Trump sees fit. Let's go. By the way, there already is a pretense for the invocation of the Insurrection Act. In recent history, this act has been invoked during the 1960s civil rights era, as well as some of you folks might remember the 1992 Los Angeles riots. The Insurrection Act was invoked similarly to shut down this domestic violence and this insurrection style behavior. So Trump here is not doing something that is totally unheard of or something that there's no recent historical precedent for, or something that is never before done. This has been done, and now Trump has the precedent, and let's be real, he has the moral and righteous justification to do it. Antifa has been causing problems in this country for years. Now, of course, let's talk about the roadblocks, the problems here. Most certainly, this will get shot down in the federal courts by some, who knows, there's tons of them, radically progressive federal judge in the lower federal judiciary, no doubt, but Trump will then likewise elevate this to the Supreme Court, where he will try to appeal it. Okay, but no doubt some radically progressive judge in the lower judiciary is going to try to shut this down. However, keep in mind, I've made a couple videos about this. Since April, 5 months ago now, 5 months ago, President Trump has, fact check me on this, this is a fact, Trump has not lost a single Supreme Court appeal in 5 months. Trump, for the last 5 months, has a 100% Supreme Court victory rate over the last 5 months. He's going on 18, maybe 19 Supreme Court victories over the last 5 months since April. So listen, President Trump, he knows what to appeal. I will, this makes sense to me. I would suppose that President Trump's legal team, they have been figuring out, are they allowed to do this? Can they do this? Do they have the constitutionality to do this? To designate Antifa as a major domestic terrorist organization, then file the Insurrection Act. Can they do this? Do they have the ground, the legal footing to do this? I would speculate here that they've been thinking about this for months. People like us, we've been talking about this for months. Trump, you got to do this. You should do this. So, internally they've been having these conversations. Guess what? They decided to do it, baby. Full steam ahead. Okay, so I would imagine that they feel pretty confident with this decision. Otherwise, they would not be doing it. They've been deliberating about this. Now, as you know, the National Guard, okay, it actually cannot be deployed domestically unless you have the approval of a governor. So you heard that President Trump is sending the National Guard into Memphis, Tennessee. Okay, well, that's because he has the gubernatorial approval of the governor of Tennessee to do that. He's working with the governor of Tennessee to do that. Memphis is in Tennessee. We're talking about what's he going to do in Chicago. Well, here's kind of the problem, is that he doesn't have the support of the governor. This is Governor Pritzker, who I always think about Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars every time I think of Pritzker. Sorry, my bad. But anyway, Governor Pritzker does not want Trump deploying the National Guard. It hasn't happened yet. Trump hasn't done it yet. Constitutionally speaking, you do need the support of the governor to do it. So he sent him into Tennessee, but he hasn't sent him into Chicago yet. This being said, now what Trump has done today, where he designates Antifa as a major domestic terrorist organization, completely flips the script. Okay, now this is the implication. If now terminologically, definitively, Antifa has been designated as a major domestic terrorist organization, every single city in the country that has an Antifa presence has some degree of Antifa presence in this country. Now Trump, he files the Insurrection Act. He invokes the Insurrection Act. Now Trump does have the constitutional legal pretense to send in the National Guard. He doesn't need. He no longer will need the support, the green light from whichever governor we're talking about. And why this is important here, I put together a list. Okay, top 10 cities in the country which has an Antifa problem. Top 10 biggest Antifa cities in the country. I want to go through the list here. Portland, Oregon. That's number one. From biggest presence to least presence. Number one, Portland, Oregon. No surprise. Number two, Seattle, Washington. No surprise. Number three, Berkeley, California. 4, San Francisco, California. 5, Minneapolis. 6, New York City, Sacramento, Austin, Texas, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, guess what, folks? 8 out of those 10 cities that have the biggest Antifa problem, 8 out of those are the top 10. I did some research. Those are the top 10. Other cities like Los Angeles, they're all over the place, you know. Okay, but these are the top 10 here. 8 out of the top 10 are in Democrat states, Democrat governors. Those Democrat governors. You think the governor of Washington, the governor of California, the governor of Oregon, you think these governors, these far left, radical, insane governors are going to let Trump go toe-to-toe with Antifa using the National Guard? Of course not. Well, guess what? Hey, surprise, far left governors. Now, Trump doesn't need your approval. Trump doesn't need the approval now. Guess what? You are, going forward, these states, you have a far left domestic terror problem insofar as Antifa is acting with impunity in your cities, in your state. And now Trump has the constitutional pretense, the legal pretense to deploy the National Guard and shut that down. So I started today's broadcast off by saying, folks, Trump has just made one of the most, I don't know if you can say the most, but one of the most consequential decisions, political actions of his entire political career today. We cannot overstate how important this is. This is a game changer, and it is. This is one of probably one of the top 5 most consequential decisions that Trump has ever made. For the last 7 days following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, there's been a national outcry. There's been an outcry from everybody right of center on the right side of the aisle here. Trump, please, you got to do something. You cannot turn a blind eye. We need to stop turning a blind eye to the violence coming from the far left. We got to shut these guys down. Drop the hammer. If you have to designate them as a terror organization, do it. If you got to deploy the National Guard, do it. If you got to file RICO charges to shut down their funding mechanisms, where's the money coming from? Do it. If you got to subpoena the internet service providers and the cell phone networks and the whatever to figure out who these guys are talking to, how are they coordinating, where's the money coming from? If you got to get their bank logs, do it. Shut these people down. We cannot have any more violence, folks. What you have seen today, this decision, Trump designating Antifa as a far-left radical terrorist organization, major domestic terror organization, that is what this looks like. This is what that looks like. This is what accountability looks like. This is a massive play. Now, folks, like I said, this is an emergency broadcast. I'm not going to be here all day. I wanted this one to be short and sweet to really just get this out of my system, get the news out there, let you guys know what's going on. This is going to be a developing story, but that is all I have to share with you guys today. Thank you all very much for tuning into this. Really, this was an emergency breaking news broadcast. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe. We're live on Rumble, Matt Morris TV, YouTube, Matt Morris TV. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Everybody find me on X for more breaking news updates on X, formerly known as Twitter, Matt Morris TV. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Listen, guys, we are no longer on the defense. We are going on the offense. We have turned a blind eye to these far-left radical terror networks for too long. In the name of Charlie Kirk, dare I say, can I invoke his name here? In the good name of Charlie Kirk, rest in peace, bless his soul. We got to go on the offense here and start shutting these people down. This is what that looks like. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I'll see you folks tomorrow. Everybody have a good night and a good morning. We'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Thank you all very much.